Walking your way to better. Hey ladies, I'm back, and today I'm really excited to share today's interview with you. It is with Joyce Shulman. She is an entrepreneur, an advocate, a CrossFitter. She is an idea junkie. She is the founder of 99 Walks. She's also a recovering lawyer, as she self-proclaims. Her book is called Walk Your Way to Better, and I'm really excited to share this conversation that you're going to hear, because Joyce and I actually talk about the therapeutic sides of walking, and I share my own personal story of how I used to think walking was useless. But it's interesting how these simple ideas and concepts create transformation in our lives. So I'm super excited to share with you today's interview with Joyce. And before we jump into today's episode, I want to remind you of a few things. We are still doing intro calls for Mastery 2.0 business. This is a business, a kind of a personal development and sales and marketing program experience accelerator. It's 8 months long for women in business. So if you are interested, head on over to heatherchauvin.com/take back control. Fill out that application and we will review it and set you up for an intro call to see if it's a good fit for you. That's heatherchauvin.com/take back control. And if you have any personal questions you'd rather ask me before applying, then head on over to your phone, which you may be listening on, and text me 313-710-5199. 313-710-5199. I look forward to having a conversation with you, learning how we can take your business from depletion, burnout, to profitability, ease, and sustainability. It is possible, and every business is unique. This is an inner journey, an inner game of leadership, but also with the right marketing strategy, you can gain confidence and get you to where you want to be. All right, let's dive into today's episode with Joyce Shulman. All right, Joyce, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today.
I'm really excited about this conversation. I was on your podcast and we've connected actually a few times now, and technology and things just got in the way. Third time's a charm, right? That's what they say.
Absolutely.
Persistence is key. And I absolutely, from talking to you a few times, we've kind of come to the realization that we have a few things in common, which are, our personalities and what perseverance is. And we talked about being a rebel together, and your passion for walking, which I think is really interesting, because I have this, I was talking to a friend earlier today about movement and how this really supports our growth. And yet our brain will tell us, I don't want to do this. So Joyce, I would love to just, maybe if you wanted to give a nutshell version for those who do not know who you are and how you came about creating 99 Walks and what that is for women.
Sure. So I have always been somebody who's walked throughout my entire life. I vividly remember taking long walks in middle school, home from school, and just wandering. And I remember having that time at the end of a school day. And the walk home for me was about 20 minutes. And I didn't do it every day, but the days I did, I just remember that as time that I was really able to process the day and create some distance between the all-consuming school time and the home time. And it's a practice that I've continued really throughout my life. And then over the course of the last decade, I've been working really closely with women, moms predominantly. And I've seen just this wellness crisis combined with a loneliness crisis. And one of the things that I've always loved to do is walk with my friends. And I came home one day from one of those walks, and my husband looked at me and he goes, I think there's something to this, walking with other people, walking as part of a community. And that started a conversation that ended up being 99 Walks, which is a business we co-founded about 18 months ago that has as its core mission to get 1 million women walking.
I love this. Talk more about that, because I think even at our core as women, like, we were created to be in community, and now there is this sense of isolation, or connect or disconnect. And I'm curious if you have found, kind of bringing back women to like their roots of connection through this process.
Oh my gosh, so much. One of the things that I always say is that I don't think we were meant to raise our families at the end of a long driveway behind a white picket fence. We were meant to raise up our families in community with our sisters and our aunties and our mothers and our friends. Sorry, I don't know what that was. With our sisters and our whole women community around us. And I think not living that way is causing a lot of social isolation among women. And there's a ton of research. We have some proprietary research that we did just about 2 years ago that shows that 72% of the 2,500 women we interviewed and surveyed are lonely, experience loneliness. And that's consistent with some of the research that's been done by other organizations.
Okay, so let's talk about loneliness for a second, because I used to experience this a lot, and I still can experience loneliness. This is not something that you grow out of, I believe. I mean, we are human, right? We do feel this, but there's a difference now. Have you noticed, do you experience this now? What do you do about it? Because I do believe it is a cultural epidemic.
I have gotten, over the course of the last few years, pretty good at recognizing feelings of loneliness. And the thing about it, it's a lot like happiness, right? The research around happiness shows that you have to kind of be proactive to do the things that'll make you happy. And loneliness is very much the same way. You have to actively take the steps to create the community and make those connections to alleviate those feelings and be sure that you're creating a community for yourself. And I think that's part of like the misnomer around this. And social media drives this a little bit, this feeling that everybody else has these rich, wonderful social connections and no one else feels lonely but you. But the truth is that everybody has those feelings from time to time, just about everybody. Mm-hmm. And the only way to have a community is to be an active participant in creating that community.
So that, I'm giggling because I was like hoping you would say that, becoming an active participant. When we get in the mindset, or I believe this has been my personal experience and professional experience, when you get in this mindset that everything, just is what it is, it's fixed, you can't change it, you become stuck, right? But when you're in this, well, how can I? And using that sense of loneliness or disconnect or whatever's coming up for you and saying, what can I do about it? This is when you become an active participant of your life, which is interesting because walking is an activation as well. It's almost like this, you gotta start, you gotta move to allow things to flow through you. What's been your own personal experience? I know we were talking about like fear of death, fear of failure. What is that? Tell me some about what that experience has been for you and how movement has shifted that.
Let me just take a step back for a moment, because you actually hit on so many things at one time in that. And I want to talk for a moment about what you were saying about pushing away this feeling that this is how it is, and recognizing that you have the power to change those things. And there's a section in my book that is titled The Power of Yet. And one of the things that I do personally, and I encourage people to do, is literally just add the word yet to the things that you think are fixed. So I am not someone who walks regularly yet. I am not someone who is good at X. It's like shocking to me how often you hear women say, I'm not good at X. And simply by saying, I'm not good at X yet, you kind of open the door, even in your own mind, to the possibility that can change.
Wow, that actually makes a big difference. Like even just thinking about some of the things I say, I'm like, oh, dang, put a yet at the end of that.
I literally just said something to my husband, who's also my business partner, yesterday. And I said, I'm not good at blank. And in my mind, I thought, oh, that is not the way to talk about something. And I added yet, and I have the opportunity to get better at that.
That's amazing. It's interesting how we always learn, right? We're learning and relearning our own stuff.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your dark parts. I love talking about dark parts. I'm always curious about the person behind the brand, the person behind the story. There's always a story there, right? You're always curious, like, how did that person get to where they are? So tell me a little bit about that, Joyce.
I don't know. The question of what are the dark parts is kind of, I don't know, a little ambiguous for me. I'm not quite sure how to wrap my head around that. You did mention fear of death, and
Yes.
I've always had, this is certainly part of what drives me, I've always had this profound sense that I'm running out of time. And I've had that feeling since I was really, really young. So that is something that drives me in a positive way because I'm crazy productive. But it also drives me in a negative way because I feel this time pressure because life is so short and there's so much I want to do and experience that balancing those two feelings is definitely tricky.
Isn't that interesting how we can have that? It's like some have it and some just do not have the fire under their ass to get moving.
Yep.
Interesting. What do you call this? Fond, FONDE?
Yeah, that's it. So we've all heard about FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. But I have a different concept called fear of not doing enough because I don't really suffer all that much from FOMO. You know, sometimes you'll see something on social media and you'll think like, wow, she's having a really good time. I wish I was doing whatever it is she's doing. But for me, the driver, that fear is the fear of not doing enough. Fear of leaving something undone that was important, fear of leaving something on the table, fear of letting someone down who either counts on me or who I can lift up.
And where do you think that comes from?
Truthfully, I just kind of think I'm wired that way. I'm sure some of that comes from my dad. My dad is one of those people who has always set out to lift up anyone he can reach in any way. He's a coach, a retired coach, always with a great sense of human being and kids and wanting to save kids, help kids, support kids, all of that. So it definitely comes partly from him. But truthfully, I just think I'm kind of wired that way.
This is something that I have struggled with and still catch myself in it, of the not enoughness, right? So I find a lot of, I don't know, go-getters, ambitious, like whatever you want to say, the people, the dreamers who are like more, like there is another way, there is more here. But when it shows up in your parenting as well, of like not enoughness, it can be masked with guilt and shame. I'm like, this isn't the way to live your life, like never feeling like you're doing enough or there's more to do. I'm like, where can I find this space of contentment, right? Like, can I just sit in that for a moment? Have you ever been able to get to that space?
It's funny to me when you mention that feeling around parenting, and I may get my head handed to me for this, but I actually don't have that so much with parenting because I believe in my heart of hearts that we really have to let our kids have the space to grow into the people that they were meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a little bit more space is better. So like, I'm okay if my kids get disappointed. I'm okay if my kids are bored. I'm okay if my son has more screen time than the experts say is ideal.
Mm-hmm.
So it shows up a little bit less in my parenting than in this somewhat obsessive desire I have to save the world.
I'm feeling that mine has definitely shifted more into that. I think when I started healing all my parenting stuff, the I'm not enough, I'm not doing enough in that aspect came from more of like a wounded place. And
Yeah,
transitioning over to, it's almost like the opposite, right? Like you're flipping it to this abundance of opportunity. Um,
exactly.
and now more than ever, we're seeing, well, I hate saying now more than ever. I mean, it's always there. I think the conversation is getting louder. And with the pandemic, we're really, really seeing this, like the suffering, right? The opportunities for growth and healing in the world. Um, so how do you manage that?
Manage the scope of all that needs to be done.
Yeah. And doing it from not like, so that you don't burn out.
I'll let you know when I figure out how to do it without burning out.
You're like, I walk a
I
lot.
no, it's truth. So it's interesting. We're right after Father's Day, so clearly my dad is really foremost on my mind right now. But my dad has also always lectured me, frankly, just about on the importance of movement and taking care of myself. So anytime I talk to him and he says, "How are you?" and I give that knee-jerk reaction that we're trying not to do of saying, "I'm so busy," he will invariably say, "But have you taken time for yourself today? Have you gotten some exercise? Have you taken a break?" So I have gotten that message simultaneously with the do whatever you can to make the world a better place. So I try. In fact, I said to Eric, my husband, this morning, "Can we go paddleboarding at 5 today? Because there's no wind and the sun is shining." And I was up at 5 o'clock working. And I think by 5 o'clock tonight, I should be able to go out and paddleboard for 45 minutes. So it's hard. Gosh, it's so hard to walk away. I guess part of it is trying to recognize that the work will always be there. The emails are going to keep coming. I'm sure you have that as well, right? Like at some point, you just have to say, enough, enough for today or enough for this week.
Mm-hmm.
You're much better at putting a fence around your time, I think, than I am. You're much further along on this journey.
Well, I think it's because my contrast, I was like, not this, not this. And I've just focused so much of my life's work around, if not this, what, right? And then focusing on how good can I get? How good can I get? And you do realize the work will never end and the opportunities will never end, right? The more energy you put out there. But I also really believe in manifestation. And I've seen it that the better you feel, the more that comes back to you. And so even though I too have that urge and pull of, oh, dang, there's no end in sight, I know that the better I feel, the more it's going to come back to me and it's going to allow it to be easy. And I've seen it again and again and again. I'm sitting here at my computer and I'm just checking things off. I'm like, okay, go, 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 go. Yep. Got it. Got it. Got it. And I just tune in for a moment and go, even though you've been drinking your water, Heather, and you've been sitting here and eating, like you're like a house plant about to wither away. You need sunlight and you need to get outside and move. And even though I can check those things off, I'm like, there's something more that my soul is craving. And every single time I feed that and come back to life, all of those things that I've put out there come back to me so much quicker.
It's just, gosh, it's just a lesson that you need to keep teaching to anyone who will listen.
Mm-hmm. It's
Starting with,
intuitive
oh,
too.
thank you.
And walking is a big part of that. Getting out, like moving, processing. We're so stuck all the time. Women will say, I don't know what I want. I don't know where I want to go. I don't know what I want to do. And I call bullshit. I'm like, you do know what you want. It's giving yourself permission to want what you want.
It's also giving yourself the time and space to hear what you want, because we are burying ourselves in the busyness. And that's why walking is so profound, because if you do it right, and when I say do it right, I mean do it without expectation, just giving yourself that time and that space. That's what so many of us need every day to let that voice come clear. You cannot hear the voice when all the noise is surrounding you. You cannot hear your voice, your true voice, while you're sitting at your computer answering emails.
100%. Okay. Do you know, so people will say, what is that voice? Like, how do I know if I'm listening to it? Do you have like a moment or an example that you could give of what that voice is? How do you know you're hearing it? How do you know it's there?
Unfortunately, I don't know that you do until retrospect with any certainty. But from my own experience, I know that clarity doesn't start to come until I have walked for at least 10 or 15 minutes. So, and this goes for almost any kind of exercise. Everybody knows that the first 10 minutes kind of suck because you never feel like it. If you wait until you feel like walking or you feel like exercising, you just never will. You just have to go.
Yeah.
And it takes a little bit of time. I understand there's a little bit of this around journaling. I'm not a big person for journaling, even though I love to write. But I've heard people who journal regularly saying, you got to give it 10 minutes before you start to get to the good stuff. And for me, walking is the same way. I've got to give it 10 minutes before I start to get to the good stuff. And the other thing about that is you can set an intention and you can ask yourself a question and you can head out on a walk or you can sit down to journal and reflect on that question and hope that that voice comes to you. It's not going to happen every day. The voice, the truth, sometimes things just need to percolate and come to you in their own time, and you have to be willing to give them the space. You know, sometimes I head out for a walk and I've got a lot on my mind or I've got a problem I'm trying to work through, and half an hour, 40 minutes later, I come home feeling better, but without having solved the world's problems.
Right. I also find, kind of like you said, in retrospect, but there is this, I guess people would call it vulnerability, but just learning to trust yourself, like having blind faith, right? I think this is what I'm supposed to do, therefore I'm going to do it and see what happens, throwing noodles at the wall. Have you had that experience?
I think that comes from two things. So the first is being willing to be vulnerable and take a chance. But the second is just being willing to make a mistake. When do we become so afraid of making mistakes?
I have no idea. This perfectionism that is invading a lot of women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so listening to your voice is partly being willing to say, okay, I'll try that, even though it might not work out. And you know what? Sometimes it might not. You got to try things that might not work out. But that may be part of your journey and part of the voice too. So I think that we sort of second guess ourselves, right? I tried X, it didn't work. So therefore I can't trust myself. Does that make any sense?
100%. Yep. And then, yeah, or you've had a bad relationship or something, something else coming back over foreshadowing that. Tell me about, all I'm thinking as you're talking is, I think I said this on your podcast. I don't know if I did or not, but when I was in my own journey, I used to see people walking all the time and I thought they were wasting their time. Did I tell you about this?
No.
I didn't. Okay. So post-cancer, I was so determined to figure out how to feel alive and happy and all the words that people say that make no logical sense to me. And I'm like, alive, happy, like, what does that mean? How do I get there? Like, can I go buy this in the store? What does that mean? So I would look at people and I'm like, well, they look happy and, they're riding bikes and they're walking. And the first few times I started walking, for no reason at all, but just walking, didn't have anywhere to go. Like, this is such a waste of my time. This is like, where am I going? What am I doing? So can you explain? I can't be alone on this, that I'm the only, when you start a habit, the brain is like, this is dumb. This is stupid. I'm curious your thoughts, or if you've had anyone say that, like, it's like, I don't have time for walking, and yet it's going to give you so much more of that. So do you have like a commitment that people should stick to, like a month of walking every day before the brain shifts over into the feeling good part? Or do you just think I'm a weirdo who thinks walking is strange? Used to
I don't,
think walking
I
is
have not heard that from a lot of people. More people, when they carve out the space for themselves to take what I call an intentional walk. So not counting your steps, not parking on the far side of the parking lot, all of which is good, right? More steps, more movement is good. But we're talking about intentional walks, carving out that 20, 30, 40 minutes. More often than not, when people start doing that, they feel the positive impact of that pretty quickly. For me, walking with friends is really magical because it checks 3 boxes at one time. So here I am. Here comes my total type A insanity. But if I walk with a girlfriend, I have the opportunity to have a really rich conversation because conversations that you have while walking tend to be really great. I get to be outside in nature, which, to your potted plant analogy, heaven knows we need as much as we can. And I get some exercise. So I get to check 3 boxes at one time.
Yeah.
So I suppose one of the things I would suggest to people who have that kind of awkward feeling around walking is find a way to walk with a friend. And I know we are all keeping some physical distance, but you would be surprised if you just put on your headphones and call a girlfriend, call your mother, call someone you care about, and head out on a walk together virtually, chatting. It's not as good as being together in person, but it's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. You're creating that space. I used to call friends. This wasn't walking, but I guess I would run when I was doing my marathon training. And I would call a friend. It was like, who wants to be a millionaire? And I'd call a friend and I would say, I need your help. And they would literally walk me through my walk or my run.
Yep.
I'm like, I just want to turn around. I want to go back home. And they're like, no, keep going. You got this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you have a book.
I do.
Can you tell us about your book?
It's funny because my book is so much of what we're just talking about. So my book is 99 really short sections, each one of which is a story, a thought starter, a piece of research, something that I think is of value. And then I'm encouraging my readers to read that and take that piece of wisdom out with them on a walk and give themselves the chance to process and think about it. It's really an exercise in intentionality and giving ourselves the space to think about the things that we don't take the time to think about.
I love this. What I keep hearing is the importance of space.
Yep.
The importance of space to process. It's almost like we forget that we are natural beings and you don't just plant a seed and the next day it blooms.
And I know this is part of the work that you do. We have a lot of wisdom within us. And we have to be willing, this goes back to what you were saying about listening to the voice. We have to be willing to give ourselves the opportunity to hear, because why not? Why not? Otherwise, we're just not tapping into what gives us joy. We're not tapping into what will make us extraordinary. We're not tapping into the things that we know.
I love that. What's bubbling up for you now, Joyce? Like, what's your next? We talked about, managing the abundance. What is lighting your soul on fire these days and excited to create out into the world, maybe in the next year or so?
I really want to write another book, and I really want to write or create a guidebook, workbook to go along with my book, because people keep asking me for it. And every time I sit down to do that, and I think I have clarity of a vision for that, it doesn't come together the way I picture it in my head. But that's certainly something I really want to do. I'm working on a book all around community and how to build and foster community. So that's kind of an early work in progress, but really important to me. And the 99 Walks community is honestly growing growing very, very quickly. And one of the things that's so important to me is managing the growth of that community in a way that still maintains the intimacy and the sense of community and sisterhood that's coming in out of that community in a very natural way. But I want to be sure that we are very intentional about maintaining that as we grow.
Yeah, I would love for you to talk a little bit more about the 99 Walks community and how that works, because it's an app, right?
Yep. So 99 Walks is an app, and we encourage women to set a monthly goal for themselves, a mile goal, and set out on intentional walks to crush that goal. We have a walk tracker. We have daily walking classes and walking meditations and podcasts that you can listen to from within the app. And when our pack members crush their goal at the end of the month, we send them what we call wearable inspiration, which is a bracelet engraved with the theme of the month. And then there's just a wonderful, as I said, community and sisterhood within that community. And it's a monthly subscription. It's $16 a month for everything, including the wearable inspiration and shipping and the daily classes. And it's a pretty 360 kind of experience to really encourage women to start walking their way to better.
I love this. I know my mother-in-law is an avid walker, and she walked previous to retirement, but she walks at least 5 kilometers every day, and every single day, rain or shine. And then my father-in-law rides his bike, and I attribute that to their health. Like, you just see them, they're glowing. Their quality of life is higher. You can tell that they have a deep sense of purpose, just because they're willing to stick to that commitment of daily movement. And you don't have to, besides having some running shoes, that's all you need.
It's all you need.
Before we wrap up, I really want to circle back to the importance of community, because the reason why, one, we're listening to this podcast, like, it's so cool how we can create virtual communities as well. There's the good and the bad and all of that. But I mean, the internet is a beautiful place. I've met so many amazing people, and I don't even know if I know I wouldn't be where I am without the women that I have met through online communities. But one thing that I did not even know was missing was the power of community. And oftentimes when I'm talking to women and they're starting to work with me, they're like, Heather, I love your philosophy and what you teach. I just want you. I'm like, listen, you don't understand the power of community until you have found your community. And as someone who would identify myself as a leader, an ambitious woman, the visionary, it was difficult for me to step into that, because I always felt like I was carrying everybody. But when you find the right community of women who are willing to challenge you and to hold you up, and you can hold space for each other, and the value and skills added, putting yourself in that position, it's absolutely priceless. And considering you're writing a book on this, or starting to write a book on this, I would love to hear how community has influenced your life.
Before I get to that, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How did you create that community? So you talked about how powerful it was for you when you found that community. How did you do it?
So I first hired a coach, and I entered into her space. So I fell in love with her and entered into her space, and I didn't even know what it was. And I remember being in my traditional corporate job and just, her ideas, her beliefs, and being in her world, and then being surrounded with that was almost like it amplified that feeling. And so by osmosis, I kind of like changed. And then I just started speaking. So the podcast was really a community creator for me. And then as I started working with people one-on-one, I'm like, okay, you all have the same problems. You're all asking the same questions. Why don't we just do this together? And then slowly, I just said, okay, there's 5 of you that want to have this conversation. So let's have this conversation. Okay, now there's 10 of you. Now there's 20 of you. And then it got to the point where I could see the leadership within the community, and then started leading those people and saying, hey, do you want do you want to teach a topic? Like, do you want to teach this topic to the group? And then they'd say, oh crap, that's scary. And I'm like, yeah, that's okay. And then after they would teach the topic, so it just kind of exploded.
So a lot baked into that and your experience. The questions around your question to me was, I don't remember how I found community or how
it's impacted you.
How it's impacted me. So there have been different communities that I've been a part of throughout my life, but I hearken back to this group of women who I practiced law with. My first real job out of law school, I worked for this amazing, amazing law firm with brilliant people. And the work was hard and all of that. But there were 6 women, all young female associates. And we became a posse. We became a crew. And we would have lunch together every single day. And you could bring anything to that lunch table. You could bring work things and people would be incredibly generous. There was no sense of competition among us. It was, how can I help you? I have a form that'll help with that. I had this experience. You could bring personal things. There was an element of trust and intimacy and mutual support that was just extraordinary. And when I left that world to start my entrepreneurial journey, I missed that so much. So I went looking for it. Going back to what I think where we started this podcast, you have to be active and go looking for that community. And it hasn't been easy. And frankly, I've kissed some frogs along the way. But you have to keep building those people and that the community of those people. And to something you said earlier, Heather, you have to be willing to be vulnerable, because if you put yourself out there and you trust people, you have to be willing to accept that some of the people you trust might not be trustworthy ultimately. And that's just the price of putting your heart out there, be it in any kind of relationship. And you can't necessarily rush the creation of community. It does take some time. Relationships take time to build.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And before I even started my business, I did not even realize the impact of that. I created a program before I created a community, and then no one bought it because there was no like and trust there. And I always tell people, you have to create a community before people get to know what you're up to, right? Like, what's the message? Where are you coming from? And they need to know who you are. I love that. Oh gosh, what did you just say? And when you were saying it, I was like, yes. Helping people, right? Just being able to say, what do you need? I have something that can be of service to you. I don't believe when you're out of that mindset of competition, magical things can happen. It doesn't matter if you're providing the same service. There are no 2 same people on this earth.
Absolutely. And that just goes to the whole mindset of scarcity versus abundance. Her success does not mean your failure. Her success means it's possible for you too.
100%. Well, Joyce, thank you so much. I love these conversations. And I've been on your podcast. I've checked out your app. Where can people find you? Where's the podcast? Where's the app? Your book, all the good things.
Sure. So 99 Walks, you can find at 99walks.fit is the website, and you can link up to the app from there. The book is called Walk Your Way to Better, and it's available on Amazon. And you can find me on social media at Joyce R. Shulman.
Joyce, thank you so much. And I just really appreciate you, your message, and your devotion to continuing on this journey of life.
Right back at ya. Thanks, Heather.